Uh, so was it 2 weeks ago, Simon, that we went to the agricultural university?
Yeah, I guess so.
I think that Dan, I think that is the latest that has happened here in Sweden in relation to the center, that we were invited to present the center and also to present the forest project, that which is one part of our activities that you have not so much been involved with, Dan, for natural reasons, because it relates to Church of Sweden forestry, and it's very much in Swedish. But I think it went well, didn't it, Simon, at the agricultural university?
Yeah, I think so. It's just it's a good practice to just like present this, because I think the more we present it, kind of like also sharpens our understanding of what it is we are doing. And I think it's also interesting to just see how does what we do relate to kind of like what agriculturalists are. I mean, I guess some of them were anthropologists, but how does it relate to what other people are doing?
Yeah, because they were using this method of living labs, for example, amongst other methods, of course, but they and that I think relates to the creative zone methodology in a way, but it's also different because it's more about actually living with people in communities that are already creating something, and you stay with them for a while, and you will both study their practice, but it's also become part of it. And I think that the creative zone method, it seems is, I mean, it's more something that you it's not something that you do for that long a time, but it's something intense, and it's bringing people together under, in a way, just the heading of the creative zone. And that I felt inspired, and that I was confirmed and affirmed in my sense that the method itself could work by that forest guy. Do you remember him? What was his name? Emil, Simon, who said that he had just entered into a group with very, very open questions. And now the dog wants to say something.
Yeah, my impression was also that, I mean, these are also engaged researchers, no? And they want to do things and they want to change things, but that they perhaps had not thought as much about this. Okay, how can we like disrupt practices? My thing was that this was very much just like to understand, to map what was going on. I mean, this was also like the group for rural development. No? So I mean, they're focused on helping like the Swedish countryside develop rather than to like disrupt kind of behavioral patterns, I guess. But my thing is that in the center, the whole idea of like bringing arts into the conversation is something that can also disrupt and kind of like challenge the way we normally go about creating knowledge. But that also create these like kind of open spaces where we can meet to discuss problems from different kind of perspectives. That is something they hadn't really worked with as much. It's something where I think the center could actually like make a big contribution also to just make the Swedish discussion. Don't know if you agree, Petra.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is the efficiency of the entire idea and the method, I think, is precisely that. Just if you invite people who are not used to being in anything called a creative zone, something happens with them, they kind of get excited. Oh, so I'm in a creative zone. sounds fun.
Or
And
they
they
get frightened.
understand that they can be someone who they are not normally, or not their professional person. And then if there are also artists present, that is like, oh, we're going to get to be playful or creative, or and my sense is that has really worked every time that we have used the concept and also or presented it. What is your feeling, Dan, about the creative zone method?
Well, one of the things I think about it, one of the things that's exciting for me is that in those situations, you go to people and you are addressing them through their expertise. So they assume that they're going to bring their specialization, their experience, all their expertise and strength into that moment. And what's unique about the creative zone is that it's actually asking you to be vulnerable. It's asking you to have a different approach to your specialization, or maybe to come in not so much with your brain power or with your knowledge, but come in with a heart, come in with a willingness to be flexible and to interact. And I think that is something that oftentimes when we talk about the arts being involved, it's assuming that there's some sort of kind of artist, priest, shaman person that has special skills or special objects. We go to a museum or we go to a concert or something, but to actually bring it into play where somebody who doesn't, somebody in forestry that applies their specialization doesn't think that what they're doing is creative or that they have a capacity to participate. And I think that is something that I think is probably what can be exciting for folks when we talk about it, that it's something that actually enlivens, it sparks and kind of gives a different shape to their own expertise, and to offer something that actually something actually happened here, and that we can begin to work with whatever that is that happened. That to me is like a really exciting thing.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's even in a sense more than that more than just noticing what is already there. It's also about bringing in a new discourse, or the possibility of opening up for a new discourse, because the discursive borders are always so strict in whatever context you're in, and the way in which to break and to move those borders, it's so delicate. And the tools are, in a sense, so few, especially I think in academia and in the churches, and also in the art world. Actually, it's, if you come in as a Christian artist, for example, that you feel the limitations immediately, I think. And I think that in relation to the ecological crisis, we just need all the tools that we can find to break the discursive borders and to let new discourses enter.
Because I think also there's an interesting question to me, which I feel it's kind of like unresolved in our center, actually, which relates to like the question of how do the arts relate to culture. We call the center like the Center for Theology, Culture and Ecology. No, Ecology and Culture. We talk a lot about the arts. Because I do think, you remember when we went to the ABBA Museum here in Stockholm? That's culture, and it's like very commercial. The question is it art? Is it arty? But I think that the feeling we had afterwards when we sat there and like discussed theology, just coming out of this experience, is like, but something does happen. So I think for me, it's also a lot about that, to just like introduce different kinds of experiences, which then kind of like rub off on different other kind of like considerations and discussions. And by that, just like have this tiny possibility to break something open and let us see something a little bit different. I don't know how you figure about like culture and art, and if that's like decided.
No, but I agree. As I remember it, we chose culture rather than the arts consciously, and that was because it was a strategic choice, in the sense that culture can also open up to, well, cultural expressions of any kind. Also a culture. So how does theology, the borderland of theology, ecology, and our capitalist culture, for example, how do those interact, and what can we do and play with there in order to show the possibility of other worlds and other ways of being together and other ways of building societies. And because I know that also, in our institution, as in every institution, you have the people that you have, and you need to find ways for those people to be creative and to be their most best. And then I find that just having as many open doors for people to enter into the center as possible is good.
I mean, that's my, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just wondering about time, if we should move it into
exactly, because I just wanted to say, because looking at time, I think that for like the Glasgow thing, I'm just checking, I think we're like in a slot which is called Exploring Existing Programs, Sweden, Toronto. So I wonder if we need to say something more about that.
Exactly. Yeah, that was what I was thinking, that we should move into that topic, the Glasgow thing, because we have quite a lot of things that has happened during the year that we could discuss, but you will be there in person, Simon, and
I will
I'm
be
really
there.
excited about this being in the existing programs topic. I wonder what an existing program is. Do you have any thoughts on that, Dan?
Well, I mean, from my area of interest and expertise with regard to art history and 20th century art, there are a lot of artists who create certain kinds of centers and imaginative locations that exist by virtue of them saying that exists. And there's a certain sense, one of the interesting things that I feel with the center is that when, you know, the Center for Theology, Ecology, and Culture kind of has a kind of idea that there's like something you can point to. There's letterhead, there's a lot of funding, there's something like substantial and essential. And what's interesting about this is that the center doesn't really exist in that way. It kind of insinuates itself. It kind of shows up here in this way, and then it disappears, and then it shows up in another way, in another manifestation. And I think that's certainly kind of scary and vulnerable, but it's also really flexible, and it's something that it seems like that it begins to expand in different ways, and it can move and shift as it continues to unfold. So the idea that something exists is something that I think is a really interesting thing to think about in terms of what this center does, because it doesn't do what, you know, funded centers in Sweden usually do. And so you don't have all of that stuff. So it's a lot more of a kind of gerrymandering, or a kind of trying to put things together on the run, or build the airplane in the air. And I think, that to me, that resonates with a lot of work that curators and artists have done, have achieved what they've achieved during the course of their work in the 20th and 21st century. So that's an aspect of the kind of arty component and the kind of creative zone where you kind of bring it forth into existence in a certain way.
I'm also thinking
and
about
I think it's interesting.
Gloria Anzaldúa and the pilgrimers who create bridges by walking. But what existing in this context, I think, means having a website, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
And since we have like the text for the website, and we will have a website, but we don't have an actual website, but we have done a lot of things. So do we exist? And also now, from what you're saying, Dan, I'm wondering, do we want a website, or do we want to exist in this more kind of luring way? But sorry, Simon.
I think when you were talking, I also get this feeling that there's something priestly about it. I mean, I think that at least in the Church of Sweden, I'm sure it's the same in many churches, we are talking about like inner calling and outer calling, where like your inner calling needs to be kind of confirmed by the outer calling. And my feeling is like there's almost more outer calling for the center than we are sure about our inner calling. Just the fact that we like go to Glasgow and we presented, and we went to the Swedish Agricultural University, and I mean, Petter, you're going to represent for the Uniting Church here in Sweden. I think there's like a lot of interest around this, and many people like from the outside bring this into existence. I think that's also quite cool.
That means it exists, right? It actually, that's the proof that it exists, that it's on a program. And
if you're invited to talk about it, then it exists, and you don't even need a website. Yeah, maybe that's the bottom line of existence.
But I think I wanted to go back just real quick for a couple seconds with regard to that experience at the ABBA Museum, because there was a sense when I remember when Petra and I were together, and and the ABBA Museum itself was a kind of a particular gesture towards broader culture, because I was invited when I was in Stockholm to give a museum tour. Instead of going to one of the high art museums, I was interested in going to the ABBA Museum to kind of look at a much more popular cultural museum experience. But I remember Petra looking at the studio, the kind of reenactment of ABBA's studio, and seeing instruments around and the chords and the amplifiers. And her observation to me was something like, well, isn't this something that could be like a creative zone or something that we could do? Like, what would it be if we got around and had our instruments, whatever instruments we had, and just played around and something could happen? And so I think, and it was that thing, that observation and that space that we began to talk about at coffee afterwards with Jonas and the other PhD students that really was super exciting. And I think that's the kind of spirit that we,
with our instruments being the theological tradition, the texts and the liturgies,
and the practitioners that we bring in and invite that are completely different. They're bringing in something else that we have no idea how it works, and they show us.
Yeah, it would be kind of fun to like dedicate the center to ABBA, no, in eternal gratitude. In any case.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. Okay. So, do you feel that you have what you need to present this in Glasgow, Simon?
I don't know. We will see how people react. No?
I'm sure you can do it.
Yeah.
Thank you both for coming. And
thank you.
That's all for today.
Yes. See you soon. Take care.